there, my name's Philip and I work for Zoolab. Thank you so much for once again getting involved with us by buying a video, a pre-recorded video, this one, being all about adaptations, which is a fascinating sort of topic within the sort of biology, and it touches on a couple of other sort of things, quite specifically habitats and evolution, are a lot to do with adaptations. This is a really good session where it is, once again, I'm inside my animal room and we'll be getting to meet some of the animals as we discuss this amazing topic. Now, the first thing that we need to do with a topic like this is try and understand this word adaptations, or to adapt, and what does it mean about these animals. Well, adaptations is all about how it is an animal is designed to make it a good fit for where it lives. So already you can see how it coincides very nicely with habitats, because that simply is where it is animals live. So habitats range from sort of rainforests, deserts and the oceans to sort of micro habitats as well, a pond, a tree. And adaptations is all about how it is an animal is designed to make it a good fit for that place. So a brilliant example that we can use straight away is something like a fish. A fish is brilliantly adapted to live in the water, in the oceans or ponds or lakes, because they can breathe underwater using these gills. They are streamlined in their sort of design and shape. They can push through the water. They've got fins and sort of flippers, or if not, that allow them to sort of again propel themselves through the water, as opposed to limbs that they need to perhaps climb and whatnot. They've got sort of scales and mucus again over their body, which allows them to be really streamlined through the water. So they're all adaptations that animal has that make it a brilliant fit for that ocean habitat. But lots of animals are designed in different ways to make them really well adapted to their own habitats. So we're going to be taking a look at some of these animals and talking all about their habitats and linking it in with evolution as well, this process of change and how it is that animals perhaps do become designed the way they are. We're going to start, in fact, nice and easily with an animal that lives in the desert. Now, the desert is a really tough place to live, in fact, and so you do need some really clever adaptations to be able to survive there, because you'll hopefully know that the deserts are really hot, they're really dry, there's not much water, and thus there's not much food as well. So you have to be very smart and clever to survive there. Now, my first guest is something that's very well adapted to live there, and most notably, straight away, you can see that he's the perfect colour for the place. He's bright yellow. He's got 4 little claws, this one, to help him be good at digging and climbing as well, and he's got big round eyes to help him see in the dark, and we'll talk about why that might be. Let's bring him out. He's one of my favourites. This is my friend Echo the gecko. He's a leopard gecko and he lives in the deserts in Asia. He's just in his little travel house next to me here, so I'll take the lid off and bring him out so we can all take a little look at him. Here he is. This is my friend Echo the gecko. He's a beautiful little lizard who's super duper friendly, and hopefully straight away you can see that he's got this bright sort of yellow colour on his back, as well as some patterning. Now, this pattern is where he gets his name from. He's called a leopard gecko, and that's because this pattern on his head and on his tail is very much sort of like a leopard print. Now, straight away, that bright yellow colour is an adaptation. It's his camouflage. This yellow colour helps him blend in with the sand, which makes him harder to be seen by his predators. There aren't too many animals in the desert sort of that might gobble him up, but certainly birds might be looking out for him, and he's much harder to be seen if he blends in with the surroundings as he can do with this bright yellow colour. Now, straight away, hopefully you can also see his big round eyes, and I've already mentioned that he can see in the dark. Those eyes are so good, in fact, they're about 350 times better than our own eyes. He can see in the dark, which is a really clever adaptation for where he lives, because the desert is really hot in the day. He has to sleep in the day, and he has to come out at night when it's a lot cooler. So the reason he's got such good eyes that allow him to see in the dark is because he's out at night, and that's when he's using his eyes to hunt for his food, as well as keeping an eye out for his predators as well. So that's why he's got such good eyes. Now, he's a leopard gecko, and because he lives in the desert, he can shut his eyes, but some geckos in fact can't close their eyes, and so to keep them nice and clean, they in fact use their tongue to blink. It whips out the side of their mouth mouth, they'll lick an eye. It has to whip out the other side and lick their other eye. Whereas this guy, he can lick his eye if it needs be, but he otherwise can actually shut and close his eyes to stop sand getting in them. Now, he's an excellent little climber. Like I said, I can show you him have a quick little climb. I mean, he's got these claws, these nails on his hands and feet, which allow him to be able to climb very well indeed. So he can hold on to me, no problem at all. And with him on my front, even though he's at the bottom there, you can hopefully see he's got this great big tail. Now, this is again a really clever adaptation for where he lives. Like I said, there's not much food in the desert. It's not really a sort of abundant like it is in perhaps like places like the rainforest. Instead, what he has to do, if he does find some of the bugs that he likes to have for his dinner, then he eats them and he stores the energy from those bugs as fat in his tail. Now, there's another animal in the desert that does this as well. The camel, the humps that they have on their back, they're full of fat as well. And it's a really good adaptation that these creatures have, like the gecko and those camels, because they can break that fat down into a sort of a makeshift water and source of energy. So if they can't find food or water, then they can rely on this fat stored in their tail or their hump to sort of keep them alive. Now, he's a lizard, and lots of lizards have another clever sort of adaptation to keep themselves safe from their predators, which is that they can drop their tail as well. Now, if we look at little Echo here, we can see, hopefully, he's got this same pattern on his head and his tail, so that if a bird looking at him from above takes a quick look, they basically won't be able to tell which is his head and which is his tail, because the pattern's the same on both. And so he stands a 50-50 chance of surviving, because if they did swoop down a bird and bite his tail, he can chop it off, he can run away, and he can grow his tail back again. And that's how he keeps himself safe. And it's not just him. Lots of lizards have that amazing ability to drop their tails and keep them safe. Anyway, he's rather sweet. Like I've perhaps mentioned, he primarily eats bugs, little crickets and locusts, any sort of bugs that he can find in the desert. He'd love to wolf them down. I'll bring him right up to the camera so you can see his little face. Those red holes behind his eyes, they're his ears. He has got brilliant hearing as well. So if he can't see things, he can perhaps still sort of hear them at night as well. Anyway, he's very lovely, and as you can see, and as I've said, very well adapted to living in the desert. This guy, obviously, he perhaps wouldn't be very good elsewhere, and certainly if I took him from the desert and placed him in the ocean, he wouldn't be able to survive at all, because that's his wrong habitat. And so adaptations, like I say, is how it is an animal's designed to make it a good fit for where it lives, and he's brilliantly adapted to the desert. We'll say bye-bye to little Echo the gecko, because we want to continue discussing adaptations, and now we're going to take a look at something a bit different. This is a creature that lives in a different habitat and so has different adaptations. Now, this creature is from the rainforest, where I've already mentioned is a habitat full of lots of animals and food, all those plants that grow there as well. His favourite food, this next animal of mine, is leaves, which is one of the reasons why he loves it in the rainforest, because there's lots and lots of leaves that he can have. He also loves the rain. In fact, that's really important for how this animal moves around, because he doesn't have any limbs or legs. Instead, he slimes his way around on his belly, carrying his house round on his back as well. Some of you might have guessed it, this is a creature all the way from the rainforests in Africa. It's a giant African land snail. His name is Turbo, and he is a big boy. I'll bring him out. Here he is. This, everybody. Oh, a bit muddy as well. Get some of that off him. Here he is. This is my friend Turbo. He is a giant snail. You can see the whole size of my palm, in fact. A huge great snail, about 10, 12 years old, in fact, and so pretty much full size. Now, he's a little bit out. In fact, we can see quite a bit of his body, but hopefully he should come out and say hello, and we'll get to see his little face, and we'll see these antennae on his head. Now, very differently from Echo, who we met that loves it in the desert, this guy loves the rainforest primarily because it is humid and there is lots and lots of rain, and that is really important for this guy, because he needs to make his body nice and slimy and move himself around using that slime as a sort of lubricant between his body and the ground. Without it, in fact, and if it ever does get too dry, he'll seal himself inside his shell and he won't come out until it's really nice and wet again. And our snails in our country, in fact, hibernate under the ground through winter when perhaps our water isn't even a liquid, it might be ice and so they can't get that moistness, the liquid that they need to move. So this guy is similarly, if it gets too hot and sunny, he'll hide himself away and won't come out. Now he is starting to come out. Hopefully we'll get to see his little face. Now, one of his adaptations is his eyes are on these big long stalks raised above his head. And that's a really clever adaptation because he's carrying this big old shell round on his back. And if he had eyes down on the front of his face, like we do, in fact, down here, then he wouldn't perhaps be able to see over his own shell and look behind him to keep a lookout for predators. And so having these eyes raised up high allows him, in fact, to see all the way around, keeping a lookout for his predators. That's a really clever adaptation. One of the biggest adaptations that he does have is this big, tough, hard shell on his back. Now, snails are really slow. In fact, he's taking his time to even bring his face out. He is doing it very slowly, so we should get to see it soon. But he's so slow, he would otherwise be really easy sort of food for his predators. But he's got this protection on his back. This great big shell is really tough and hard, just like stone. And it's what keeps him safe. And he's in fact grown this shell, he's built it. To do so, he's in fact had to have the same thing that we have to build our bones and our teeth, which is calcium. There's his little face, he's just coming out. We'll soon get to see his eyes come poking out longer, in fact. There's his little face. He needs that calcium to grow this shell. Now, we find calcium in things like milk, cheese and yogurt. He doesn't have that sort of dairy product in the rainforest. Instead, to get the calcium for his shell, he eats bones. Now, he'll find bones from dead animals. When they die and they leave a skeleton behind, he can slime on top of these old bones and eat the bones to get the calcium for his shell. Now, to eat something tough like a bone, he's got a very clever mouth. His mouth is full of teeth, in fact. You perhaps wouldn't think so because it's a very sort of soft body, sort of muscular body, but inside his little mouth he's got over 10,000 teeth, these tiny little teeth that you can only really see under a microscope. He'll slime himself onto his food and he scrapes at his food, grinds it down, and that's how he eats even tough things like bones, as well as all that vegetation. Like I said, he loves leaves, but he can eat all sorts of fruit and veg. I give him sort of sweet potato, cucumber, all sorts of veg. He loves it all, in fact. Now, there's a couple of his adaptations. He's also right down on the forest floor. This is a sort of a behavioural adaptation because he'd love those fresh green leaves from the treetops, but he doesn't want to go up there into the trees because that's where birds might be and they're his biggest predator. And he also doesn't like the sunlight very much. So he stays down on the forest floor where it's actually quite dark. And so it's the perfect habitat. All those leaves, all that sort of water which he needs to move, and dark and free of most of his biggest predators, the birds. There might still be some mammals sort of sniffing around that might sort of threaten him, but otherwise birds are their biggest predators by far. But that's why he's got this big tough hard shell to keep him safe as well. So there's Turbo, a giant African land snail who's very differently sort of adapted to his environment of the rainforest. Again, these eyes keeping a lookout, great big shell, slimy body, and all that water of the rainforest helps that. So that's Turbo, and I'm delighted that he came out to say hello. You can see these little antennae on his chin. They're his noses. Snails have two noses, which is how he'll help sort of find his food, in fact. We're going to say bye-bye to Turbo. They will pop him away and bring him right up so he can say goodbye, little Turbo. And we're going to carry on because so far we've been talking all about adaptations and how these animals are very good at living in their specific habitats, the desert for Echo the gecko and the rainforest for Turbo. But there are also animals that are actually quite good at living in lots of different places. In fact, different species can perhaps live in hot places, cold places, wet places, dry places. And the animals generally that can that sort of do fit a specific habitat, like Echo and the Turbo, they're called specialists. Whereas these animals that can actually sort of live in lots of different habitats and perhaps sort of have an adaptation to allow them to sort of move around habitats, these are called generalists. Now, us humans are in fact probably the best generalist animal there is. We have, with our big brains, been able to design ways of living in wet places, hot places, cold places, dry places, all around the world we live now. And we've adapted using our minds and building things like clothing and housing and technology to keep us sort of happy in those different places. But my next animal is probably just second place to us. It's a creature that's that's been around for a very long time and has some amazing adaptations that allow different species of this creature to live all the way around the world as well. He's only small, he's got 6 legs on his body. And in fact, this is a creature that some people really don't like at all. I think they're fascinating, but most people perhaps consider them a real pest. These are, in fact, the cockroaches. And I've brought with me my friend Mike, a Madagascan hissing cockroach. But you do get lots of cockroaches that live all over the world. Now, he's just in his little house here. I'll take the lid off and bring him out. Here he is. This, everybody. This is my friend little Mike. There he is. I'll try and show him on the screen as best I can. He's only small, in fact. He's probably quite young, but they can get a little bit bigger than this. Now there's his antennae waving around, and I can tell this is Mike straight away because of these bumps on his head. They're called horns, and only the men have horns. The females, they don't have any horns. They've got a smooth head, and so that's how I know this is Mike and not Michelle. Those antennae are like his ears waving around. He's listening in. Now, he's a fascinating little creature. Lots of people don't like them because they can sort of live in dirty places, and they can breed very quickly as well and become a bit of a pest by sort of living perhaps where you don't want them in your kitchens and whatnot. One of the reasons why they're happy there is because they're not fussy eaters at all. In fact, cockroaches can eat almost everything. They can eat all the foods that we have. They can even sort of munch on plastic, cardboard, glue, soap. And for lots of them, their favourite food is poo. Lots of cockroaches live in caves where bats are pooing down from the ceiling onto the floor, and these guys will be running around gobbling up their poo, in fact. I don't give him poo though. I give him old bits of fruit and veg, and so he's very healthy, in fact, this boy. Now we can see he's also an excellent little climber. Using his little hooks on his hands and feet, we can probably even see him hold on upside down. There he is, just about having a climb around. Some cockroaches can also be super speedy. This guy is a Madagascan hissing cockroach, so he's pretty slow, but some cockroaches can be really fast enough to run sort of over the top of lava and through fire, in fact. Some cockroaches can also hold their breath underwater for up to about 40 minutes, some cockroaches. Some cockroaches can also be frozen in ice and then come back to life after because they've got antifreeze for blood. And most impressively is the fact that lots of these cockroaches can even live without their head. And that's because they've got 2 brains. They've got one brain in their head and another brain in their belly. So if they do lose their head, they can still use this brain in their belly to wiggle themselves around, and even without their head, they can still bump into a partner and make some babies, which is really important. And that's the name of the game for most animals, in fact. Let's see if I can get him close enough to sort of focus in. Oh, there he is. Not really, still focusing on me. There he is, you can see he's got spiky little legs that help him climb as well. Now, all these amazing superpowers that I'm talking about, these are all adaptations that these cockroaches have that have made them sort of be able to survive for a very long time. They can also, like lots of insects, withstand really high levels of radiation as well. So there's sort of a famous, sort of a bit of an urban myth that, cockroaches would survive a nuclear war. And the truth is they can withstand really high levels of radiation. All these sort of powers that they have allowed them to survive for a very long time. They've been on our planet for about 320 million years, and like I say, there are different species of cockroach that live all over the world, and that's because they do all have some of these amazing superpowers to allow them to survive. Now, we will talk quickly about adaptations and how they come about. And it's via a process called evolution, essentially, and a process within that called natural selection, sort of typically. And this is a process that takes millions and millions of years. One thing that you shouldn't get not to get too confused about is adaptations don't happen quickly. If I took sort of Echo and popped him in the ocean, he wouldn't survive because he can't adapt. He's already adapted to that desert environment, and that is the case for sort of animals. The evolution and natural selection to having designed them the way they are has taken millions and millions of years, and it can't change quickly sort of over any time at all. It takes that long because it's environmental pressures that in fact cause animals to sort of design their bodies differently and hopefully survive and reproduce, like this guy's got that clever sort of even without his head ability ability, and it's something that they'll pass on through their genes and through their DNA to sort of show itself in their offspring. And this, in fact, if it goes on for lots and lots of times, can change things quite dramatically and design these new ways of sort of a body being to make them better adapted. And there's some great examples, like Darwin obviously came up with this theory of evolution, and he met lots of animals on his travels. And if you look into Darwin's finches on the Galapagos Islands, you can see how these birds all had sort of different beaks to allow them to eat different foods. And that's because rather than compete all for the same food, it's better that they had a better chance of surviving by going off and finding their own food and not having to compete for sort of their one source of food. And so there's birds there that eat sort of the grains and seeds. There's others that use their bills to sort of bore into wood and pick out grubs, and others that have shallow beaks picking things off the ground. And that's because that competition sort of creates it better for them to go off and sort of create their own niche, and then their bodies have become designed better at doing that over lots of time. Anyway, that's a very simplified version of how adaptations are sort of created through evolution, and it's all to do with natural selection, how nature is selecting a good trait to sort of carry on and go into sort of forming itself in sort of youngsters in the future over lots of generations. This guy, like I said, cockroaches have done a brilliant job of making themselves very special and surviving. They are very cool. Now, we'll pop him away because there is one last animal that I'd love for you guys to meet. These days we can look inside sort of animals, taking a look at our DNA and our genes, and so we've got a better understanding genetically of how sort of evolution happens and where it is that sort of mixing up and mutations have occurred to create these new sort of forms or sort of traits that animals have to have made them really well designed. So that is a very simplified version of it. We can now look into sort of mutations and genes, but without getting too deep and heavy about it all, let's take a look at my last animal, which is again a creature, an animal where different species have become adapted to different places and different habitats. So some can live in the deserts happily alongside Echo the gecko perhaps. Loads of them love it in the rainforest. We've got some in our country. There are even some species that are very well adapted to living in the ocean and can hold their breath for a long time, swim through the water with their flat sort of bodies. This is a creature that is also one of my favourites, and the one I'm showing you, the species I'm showing you, is really clever. Got an excellent adaptation for where he lives, and the competition he has there is a creature with no legs, scaly skin, and he goes sss. I'm sure you've all figured out that it is, of course, a snake, and the snake I've brought that I'd love to show you is my friend William Snakespeare. Now, it's a very cool name, I know, but he's also a very cool snake. William here is a king snake. This, everybody, this is my friend William. Now I'll straight away try and bring his little face up to the camera so you can see his tongue whipping out, and he'll hopefully have a little say hello. But he's very wiggly, this one, so we'll have to be quick. But there he is. This is my friend William. He's a beautiful king snake. Let's try and get his face on the screen there. There he is. Hopefully you can see his tongue quickly whipping out. That's him sniffing and smelling with his tongue there. The reason he's got that forked tongue is so he can smell left and right and find out where things are as well. Little rodents and maybe lizards and frogs that he wants to have for his dinner. He's a very cool snake, and what is so brilliantly adapted about this guy is his pattern and his design. If I hold him up like this, make sure he doesn't wiggle away too much. He's put his head through my chair. Got to bring him back. Here he is. Hopefully you can see he's got this rather striking stripy pattern of sort of blacks, reds and yellows. Now these bright colours, they often suggest danger in nature, but this isn't really a dangerous snake at all. What he's done, an adaptation he has, is he's pretending to be dangerous. He is in fact a mimic. Where he lives in North America, there's another snake called a coral snake, which is deadly venomous. This snake here is pretending to be it, because if a predator, like a bird or a mammal of sorts, took a quick look at him and saw these bright colours, they might think he's that coral snake, and they'll leave him alone because they know that it's got that dangerous venom. But this guy, in fact, doesn't have venom at all. He's just pretending to be dangerous, which is really clever. So his predators can look at him and again leave him alone because of these bright colours. Now, he's called a king snake because in the wild, he can also, in fact, eat other snakes, including that coral snake, the deadly venomous snake. And that's because he's super speedy. He can catch it and bite it and wrap around it before he gets bitten himself. Now, the snakes that don't have venom, like this guy, they're called the constrictors. And all the snakes in the world are either venomous, like a king cobra or a black mamba or a coral snake, or like this guy, these are the constrictors that wrap around their food and squeeze it nice and tight. So, snakes, like I say, there are different sorts of snakes that are really well adapted to lots of different places. And this one is really good in the sort of woodlands and farmlands in sort of North America. Anyway, snakes are also one of my favourite animals. Hopefully you can see he's incredibly wiggly. He keeps wanting to go down to the sort of camera, in fact. And he can move around no problem at all because of how he's designed. He's also got, he's full of muscles. So we have about 600 muscles in our body. This guy's got about 6,000 to 6,000 to 10,000 probably muscles in his body. And he's got loads of bones. So all the way down his body, and he's got this nice long backbone, and he's got lots and lots of rib bones as well. So we have 206 bones when we're an adult. This guy's got about 450 bones. Loads and loads and loads. And all those bones and muscles allow him to move himself around. Now, snakes, you should perhaps know, are reptiles. And these guys themselves have probably, in fact, evolved and adapted to become the way they are from sort of lizards. They've perhaps lost their legs through evolution and now are essentially, you know, completely legless. But they perhaps once did have legs previously, but they've evolved and changed to make them legless. These and now they're the snakes that we know. Anyway, a beautiful snake. I hope you'll agree, who's rather wiggly and excited to be here. But I hope you've enjoyed meeting little William. We'll pop him away and we'll just have a quick recap and sort of mention again that adaptations is this amazing topic. We'll just pop the lid on so he doesn't wiggle around. It's an amazing topic, this adaptations sort of field of biological science, all about how it is animals are designed the way they are to fit the environment. And we've touched briefly on how it happens via sort of natural selection and evolution, changing over time through generations, of these animals becoming a better fit for their environment. And we've also obviously touched on habitats and where these animals live. It's been brilliant to talk to you, even though I'm sort of doing it through a screen. I really hope you've enjoyed meeting a few of my animals as we've been talking about the amazing topic of adaptation. It's a really fun topic, and so I hope you continue to look into it. Thank you very much from me and all the gang here at Zoolab. We hope to be back out with you as soon as possible, but until then, please do keep watching our vids, and we'll speak to you soon. All the very best from everyone. Bye bye. Hi, we're Zoolab, the UK's #1 for ethical hands-on animal encounters.